This guy has been inside Apple for 25 years. He helped build the iPad. He built the chip that made your MacBook actually fast. He fought against the Vision Pro internally, and he was right. And on September 1st, he becomes the most powerful person in consumer tech. Most people have no idea who John Ternus is. By the end of this video, you will. And honestly, you're going to have an opinion about whether Apple just made the best decision it's made in a decade, or quietly started its slow decline. Let's get into it. The real reason isn't what anyone's saying. So the internet is doing that thing where it takes a true story and completely mangles the meaning. The story going around is that Apple is panicking, that Tim Cook is being pushed out, that this is damage control. It's not. Here's what actually happened. Earlier this year, Tim Cook got in front of Apple's entire company at an all-hands meeting and said 3 things. 1. Last quarter was the best quarter Apple has ever had. Over $140 billion in 3 months. 2. The product roadmap coming is stronger than anything Apple has lined up before. 3. Ternus is ready. That's a guy leaving on his own terms, at the absolute peak. Not running away from a fire, walking away from a bonfire he built himself. And look, what Tim Cook did is genuinely insane when you step back. He took Apple from $350 billion to $4 trillion. The stock went up nearly 2,000% under him. He made Apple the first company in history to cross $1 trillion in value, then $5 trillion. The man is not a failure. He is arguably the greatest operator in corporate history. But, and this is the important part, Tim Cook is not a product guy. People inside Apple will straight up tell you, Tim doesn't get involved in product development. That was never his thing. His genius was the machine behind the products. Supply chains, manufacturing, government relationships, keeping the whole operation running smoothly enough that Apple could print money quarter after quarter. Ternus is the opposite of that. And that difference? That's going to change everything about what Apple makes and how it makes it. Okay, so before Ternus ever worked at Apple, his final project at university was building a robotic arm for people with quadriplegia. It was controlled entirely by head movements. I'm not telling you that to be sentimental. I'm telling you that because it tells you exactly how this person's brain works. He's not thinking about what's cool. He's thinking about what actually solves a real problem for a real person. He joined Apple in 2001, started in displays, built cinema monitors that, genuinely, people are still using today because they were made that well. Then he worked on the original iPad, from prototype. And while everyone else was treating it as a giant iPhone, Ternus was the one internally pushing for iPadOS to become its own operating system. Because he thought running iPhone software on iPad hardware was handicapping the product. He won that argument, which is why your iPad today works the way it does. Then AirPods. Then Apple Silicon, the M chips that made your MacBook actually fast instead of a hot, throttled mess. Then last month, the MacBook Neo, a $599 laptop from Apple that reviewers are calling the best value laptop on the market right now. From Apple, $599. Best value on the market. That sentence would have been insane to say 5 years ago. And Mark Gurman, who basically has a direct line into Apple's walls, said it plainly. He's the only guy. Apple gets most of its revenue from hardware. He's the hardware guy. Have they screwed up any hardware since he's been in charge? No, he's the only choice. But here's the part of this story that I think is the most interesting, because Ternus hasn't just been building things. He's also been the guy in the room saying, no, don't do that. That's a mistake. And the things he said no to? In the early 90s, before Apple, Ternus worked at a company called Virtual Research Systems. They were trying to build a VR headset. It was bad. It failed. And Ternus watched the whole thing collapse from the inside. So when Apple started seriously developing the Vision Pro, he was skeptical. He thought it was too early. He thought the price was wrong. He thought it would eat resources and engineering talent that Apple needed elsewhere. Vision Pro launched. It's a genuinely impressive piece of hardware. It's also sold so poorly that Apple has basically gone quiet on it. He was right. Then there was the car. Project Titan. Years of development. Billions of dollars. Some of Apple's best engineers redirected away from core products. Ternus thought it was a drain, a distraction, something that would cost more than it could ever return. Apple canceled the car entirely. He was right again. 2 of the most expensive bets in Apple's recent history. 2 times the room got it wrong and Ternus didn't. Now, full picture, his record isn't spotless. The butterfly keyboard. If you owned a MacBook between 2016 and 2019, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Keys dying, a $50 million lawsuit, Apple quietly replacing the whole keyboard design. That was his era. The Touch Bar, A feature so widely disliked, Apple removed it without much ceremony. Also his era. So he's not infallible, but the pattern is real. This is someone who reads what actually matters to real people, not what looks impressive in a keynote. What works in your life, on your desk, every day, and now he's running the whole company. Here's a simple frame for Apple's 3 chapters. Steve Jobs, the ideas era. Tim Cook, the money era. John Ternus, the hardware era. Behind the scenes, Apple has already been restructuring around this. New CFO, new general counsel, the head of chip design elevated to chief hardware officer. This didn't happen by accident. This has been in motion for 2 years. So what's actually coming? The foldable iPhone is almost certainly Ternus' first keynote product. It's been in development for years. The super thin iPhone Air that launched recently, that was basically Apple testing the engineering tolerances they'd need for a foldable, figuring out how thin they could go, how the hinge could work, what the display could handle. The Air was the experiment. The foldable is the actual product. There's also a 20-inch foldable iPad in the pipeline, something that sits in a weird, interesting space between a tablet and a full laptop. Whether it ships is genuinely unclear. But Ternus is apparently the type of engineer who doesn't put something down until it either works or it provably can't. He's also experimenting with AI home devices, wearables with cameras, smart glasses, and something described as a pendant with computer vision, which sounds either like the future or like something you'd see in a Sky Mall catalog, depending on your mood. But the thing I find most interesting isn't a specific product, it's the pricing shift. Under Tim Cook, Apple's philosophy was, make great products and make sure they're expensive. That was the whole game. Services revenue, premium pricing, ecosystem lock-in. The MacBook Neo at $599, universally praised, insanely capable. Feels like the beginning of something different. Premium for pros, premium for enthusiasts, but also actually great products for people who don't want to spend $1,500 on a laptop. If that holds, it changes the competitive picture completely. Everyone thinks Apple is losing AI. Here's why they might be wrong. Okay, this is the part of the story where I think almost everyone has the wrong take. Apple has been quiet on AI. No massive model announcements. No splashy ChatGPT competitor. The Siri update was genuinely embarrassing. It basically amounted to Apple saying, we'll just use Google stuff instead of actually solving the problem. And the internet read all of that as Apple losing the AI race. But what if being slow here was actually the smart move? Think about what every other big tech company is doing right now. Microsoft, Google, Meta, they are spending hundreds of billions of dollars building data centers, massive cloud infrastructure, servers, cooling systems, power plants, everything running through their cloud, through their servers, through their data collection. Apple has been doing something quieter. They've been building hardware that can run AI models locally, on your device without an internet connection, without your data leaving your hands. Mac and MacBook Pro now have unified memory that can exceed 100 gigabytes. That's enough to run seriously capable AI models right on the machine. No subscription, no server, no one else seeing your data. Ternus read on this, and from everything I can find, this seems to be a genuine strategic conviction, not just marketing, is that the future mainstream AI user doesn't want to send everything to a cloud. They want it fast, private, and on their device. Right now, that person looks like a niche hobbyist. Ternus thinks that's the mainstream user in 3 years. And here's where it gets compelling. Models are genuinely getting smaller and more capable. That's just a fact of where the research is going. If a seriously good AI model can run locally on Apple hardware, and people start actually caring about where their data goes, which they increasingly do, then Apple's hardware lead silently becomes an AI lead that nobody else can easily replicate. The gap right now is software. MLX as a framework exists, but the model intelligence Apple actually needs isn't there yet. That's real, and this is the key thing, Ternus is the only person on Apple's executive team who has a track record of actually integrating hardware and software at the design level, not porting software to hardware, designing them together from the start. That's what made Apple Silicon work. That's what made AirPods feel seamless. And that's exactly what local AI needs to feel like something normal people would actually use, not a project you have to set up for a weekend. So, is John Ternus the right person for this? Honestly, probably yes, but not for the reasons people are saying. He's not going to be a visionary CEO in the job sense. He's not going to walk on stage and make you feel like the future just arrived. That's not his style, and it's probably not going to happen. What he is someone with 25 years of evidence that he understands what makes a product actually good. Not impressive in a demo, good in your life. He was right about VR being too early, right about the car being a drain, right that the iPad needed its own OS, right that Apple needed its own chips, and now he's built a $599 laptop from Apple that people are genuinely excited about. Which, if you told me that 5 years ago, I would have laughed. The pattern is consistent. Better products, more thoughtful integration. Occasionally a real surprise, in the good direction. Steve Jobs was the dreamer, Tim Cook was the operator, Ternus is the builder, and I think Apple needed a builder more than it needed anything else right now. The foldable iPhone keynote is going to be his first real public test. That's the moment we actually see what kind of CEO he is. Not from a press release, not from an analyst call, from how he stands on that stage, what he chooses to show, and what he decides to leave out. Because the best engineers understand something that most executives don't. What you choose not to build matters just as much as what you build.